Transmitter device activated. Coordinates set for Earth 2.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Earth 2 podcast, your weekly exploration of the DC Comics multiverse and the legacy of their Golden Age characters through the Silver and the Bronze Ages of comics. I'm Peter Watson.
And I'm David Steele. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We return to the pages of the 70s Sandman series this week, indeed, as we read issue 4, published on the 29th of May, 1975. Precisely, let me do a quick bit of sums, 17 years to the day since we finished the recording for my college video project. There we go.
There you go, which is available on YouTube. Never.
Can you imagine? I know. Even Kenny Smith hasn't seen it, right?
My goodness.
So that tells you all you need to know. Steve Higgins might have seen it though. Can't remember. Anyway,
oh well.
Peter is now going to tell us about the cover to issue 4 of the Sandman, published 29th of May 1975, 17 years today, blah, blah, blah.
At the top we have the Sandman. There's a banner, actually, at the very top. We've got a rather kind of bemused-looking headshot of the Sandman who looks as if he's looking on slightly confusingly.
What am I doing on this banner? What am I doing on this banner?
Then we have the Sandman, the line of DC superstars. And then 3 other headshots of 3 of our regulars. We have Jed, who is the young boy that the Sandman seems to take a particular interest in.
Mm-hmm.
Brute, who is one of the Sandman's monster sidekicks, and Glob, who's the other monster sidekick of the Sandman.
Glob looks very ill-defined there. I'm going to make it a mission of mine to go through every issue of the Kirby Sandman to try and find the panel that picture of the Sandman has been taken from. Yeah, interesting. Reminds me of the opening titles of the Monkeys for some reason. Just the way their heads are all ranged. Anyway.
But the main image in the cover, we're back with Jed after a break last issue, and he's asleep in his bed, but coming out of several doors he seems to have in his room are big giant green monster beasties. Oh, they look horrible. And the Sandman is appearing in a cloud above Jed, and he's saying,
Jed, wake up! I can't save you unless you free me!
And there's a caption at the bottom saying, now featuring the power-packed art of Jack Kirby.
Yeah, it's very dynamic. I like the wide eyes and the big teeth of these scary green monsters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We'll have to see if it accurately reflects anything that happens in the story. Mm-hmm. But there's a sort of loose haziness to the Sandman there. It's almost, the dark areas of his costume are sort of obviously not as defined, and that's very effective.
It's very non-corporeal. Looks,
that works. Anyway, so we shall plug in. Exciting that Kirby has returned to draw it after only previously having drawn issue 1, so that's quite exciting. Right, our opening splash image, as is often the case, a caption sets the scene.
Somewhere between heaven and earth there is a place where dreams are born and monitored. This is the domain of a legendary figure, eternal and immortal, who shares with man and beast all the secrets of the ages.
Eternal and immortal, interesting. Again, as we've seen in the past, we see a large The Sandman, as if it's been carved out of rock or just been formed on a beach by a clever child. And the Sandman is in
Panic in the Dream Stream.
An opening image beneath all this lettering. Sandman, you can see Brute and Glob as well. And Jed's there. Jed seems to be holding something in his hand. It's looks like a little disc on a string, but we'll come back to that in a sec. In the distance, we can see what look like floating Loch Ness Monster-shaped spaceships. Mm-hmm. Lots of moons and planets and stuff in the sky. And across this sort of blue, rocky moonscape towards where Sandman and the others are standing, we see approaching, some of them floating, little alien-looking soldiers with weird sort of fins on the side of their head and weird large eyes and weird long slits for mouths. Very unusual. Mm-hmm. Jed is saying,
"But what are we going to do, Sandman? Those creepies outnumber us at least 100 to 1.
We're not licked yet, Jed. Not as long as you've got your yo-yo." So that's what he's holding. It's a yo-yo. In the background, Brute and Glob are squaring up to these new arrivals, and Brute is saying, "Yo-yo? You better get with it, Sandman. This is an alien invasion we got on our hands, not show and tell." Show and tell, a peculiarly American phenomenon. We didn't really have that over here,
we didn't. No,
yeah.
But we are aware of it, yes.
Yes. So it's always amusing when it's used in a story because we can go, we didn't have that in our schools. Anyway.
You show me yours, I'll tell you about mine.
And we then get the credits for this issue.
Art, Jack Kirby and Mike Royer. Editor, Joe Orlando. Script, Michael Fleischer.
So Fleischer's writing for Kirby. That's interesting. And also interesting that Michael's last in the credits.
Yes.
Perhaps controversial. Anyway, we begin the story properly. Once again, a caption sets the scene.
On a bizarre alien dimensional world rotating somewhere in the vastness of hyperspace, a grim conference of war has just gotten underway.
Yes, it's a large, wide room. Lots of Kirby details on the walls, shading and lighting and little curved shapes. And there's a large screen dominating the room in which we can see a house, a truck parked beside it. And looking up at the screen, a whole bunch of guys with orange skin, wide eyes, long horizontal slits for mouths, and these sort of fins on their head. And there's a couple of other guys on the other side of the room who don't have the fins on their head but have similar features, but they also have blue helmets on.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all sat around a table with lots of 70s style Kirby scientific equipment on it. But there's one boy, again, with the orange skin and the wide mouth and the wide eyes. I'm miming wide eyes for the benefit of our YouTube viewers. He's standing operating controls at the bottom of the screen. Floating above them all, it looks like there's a sort of guard sentry type guy. Again, a number of them have sort of military uniforms that have that very Jack Kirby 70s look of diagonal patterns and big sort of square marks on their chest and random flashes of insignia. All very interesting. And the guy who's standing under the screen, operating the controls, he seems to be leading the presentation, as it were, and he is saying,
"These, gentlemen, are the laser beam photographs of Earth which I took recently off the screen of my interdimensional monitor. Earthlings live in dwellings like these, which are called houses."
We can see the others pointing and taking all this in, and there's one man wearing a sort of purple uniform with yellow piping, with a red flash on his shoulder, and he says to the chap next to him, "Positively weird, eh, General?"
These Earthlings certainly have some strange customs, all right.
Yes, the General wears a nice helmet, which is some very 70s Kirby detailing of random shapes and shiny things. The presenter continues,
"This is a young male Earthling, an immature form of the species known as a boy. This boy is sleeping."
We see Jed on the screen as the General asks,
"Sleeping? What's that?"
"That, General, is the phenomenon upon which my brilliant plan for conquering these creatures is based. Earthlings are physically inactive at night while they renew their energy for the following day, and while they sleep, they dream."
And the large panel, which takes up 2/3 of page 3, is again an image of the screen, but we see Jed, and he's dreaming, and once again, as often seems to be the case in these stories, he's being chased by large nightmare fuel monsters. There's a weird purpley sort of spider thing with large eyes and yellow teeth, and a weird big yellow sort of lizard thing with a tail and spikes in its back and a big wide open mouth, and there's a sort of gargoyle lad flying overhead with various moons and stuff floating around in a rocky landscape. And the chap in the purple uniform points at all this and says, "Dream? What in blazes is a dream? Look, Doctor, we can't sit here all day listening to your crackpot theories. Get to the point, please." And the presenter, who we now know as a doctor, replies,
"Ah, but Mr. Secretary, this is the point. We all know that Earth is ripe for conquest, but we do not yet have the rocket technology that would enable us to get there. Now please observe the picture directly above the sleeping boy's head."
Yes, as described, the presenter or doctor continues,
"My laser beam photographs have enabled me to capture this Earthling's dream on film. A dream is a special form of fantasy that all Earthlings experience. Earthlings do not regard these dreams as being real in the way that the waking aspects of their lives are real. Now, may we have a close-up of the dream, please?"
Yes, the dream's on film, like a Monty Python sketch. The General continues,
"Doctor, these creatures chasing the boy, where do such monsters come from?"
They're all looking at the screen. You can see Jed being chased by now what looks like a giant land fish with huge pointy teeth, and there's another giant floating fish-type creature that's all red and black with big sharp pointy teeth and what looks like a crossing a squid and a shrimp chasing him as well. Was it something he ate? The doctor presenter lad replies,
"These creatures, Major, are transported into the minds of sleeping Earthlings from the dream stream, a fantasy dimension which we can journey into any time by means of a teleportational swan craft."
"Then your plan?"
"My plan, Mr. Secretary, is for a swan craft to invade the dream stream and imprison the nightmare wizard who reigns supreme there. By infiltrating the dreams of Earthlings in place of the customary dream monsters, we can enter the earthly dimension with ease and destroy the Earthlings while they sleep."
The General exclaims,
An excellent scheme, Doctor. Excellent. It shall be implemented at once.
I'm loving the 70s Doctor Who monster dialogue. And just to irritate me, Jack has drawn that panel of that last part of their conversation as an exterior view of the building that they're all sitting in. You get some nice shapes in the sky. It's all very 70s Jack Kirby with angular shapes and random detailing. There is a slow dissolve.
Meanwhile, in the Sandman's Dream Dome...
Sandman is standing with Brute and Glob, and Brute and Glob are each carrying suitcases. Brute is saying, "Thanks for letting us take some time off to visit our aunts and uncles in the dream stream, Sandman." "Think nothing of it, Brute. Things have been pretty quiet around here, and you nightmares deserve a vacation." We see Brute and Glob sliding into the ejector tube as Sandman says, "So, have a good time, you two, and Brute, give my regards to your Uncle Harry." "Will do, Sandman. Come on, Glob." A tiny caption tells us we are continued on the third page following. What's this? Enter the Razzle Dazzle Stakes. Razzle's Gum. Oh, grand prize, a trip to Walt Disney World. That's interesting. And then we pass a full page advertisement which says any 6 tapes or records for $1.69. So immediately, what am I spotting? The original cast of Godspell.
Oh gosh.
Minnie Riperton, Bob Dylan's Greatest Hits Volume 2, Barbara Streisand, The Way We Were,
Marvin Gaye Anthology.
Steely Dan, Pretzel Logic, Burt Bacharach's Greatest Hits.
Quincy Jones Body Heats.
Yeah. Jackson 5.
Sonny and Cher Greatest Hits.
Logan's in Messina, Mother Lode, that's interesting. Andy Williams, Totally Orlando and Don Mott, The Hoople, Rod Stewart, Stevie Wonder.
Jethro Tull, War Child.
Plenty. Simon and Garfunkel, The Platters.
Liberace's Greatest Hits.
Yes, Cat Stevens. There we go. Rick Wakeman, Journey to the Centre of the Earth. If that couldn't be more 1975, it was tried. So anyway, we arrive at the top of page 5 and a caption says,
Instantaneously, Brute and Glob are catapulted into the Dream Stream, the eerie twilight dimension which is the dwelling place of the hideous nightmare phantasms.
Yes, we see Brute and Glob being ejected out of a hole in the Sandman's place, and they're just basically falling into a beautiful, ornate 70s landscape.
And before long, they are busily renewing their acquaintance with the various nightmare relatives whom they left behind in the Dream Stream when they left home to become full-time helpmates to the Sandman.
A lot to unpick there. We're going to discuss that when we get to the end. This panel's amazing. Might try and fit it in the socials. There's a long table, big long trestle table with a slightly tattered-looking orange tablecloth draped over it. Brute and Glob are at the table. Glob is perched on a little sort of spike that's been hammered into the ground by the looks of things, but it's got a stool at the top, and again it's detailing. And they seem to be enjoying a big feast with a few relatives. From left to right as we look at it, there's a guy, sort of greenish purple, who's opening his mouth wide, and he seems to be eating a very large cornflake. There's someone with a mass of shaggy black hair wearing a green tunic with sort of pink and purple skin, but very, very small features. There's someone dressed in green who almost looks so it's like a shell that he's wearing, a bit like a turtle. He's a very hooked nose, beady eyes, jowly face, and he appears to be eating a lemon curd sandwich, to my eyes. Next to him, there's a very long face, wide sort of mouth, looking a bit like...
Tomari?
Yeah, touch of Tomari's. Out of all these people, he looks like the most like he's walked out the Cantina bar from Star Wars.
Yes, definitely.
He's sat looking at Brute, who looks huge in his panel. He's obviously eating a hot dog, which appears to be being prepared by the chef, who we can see at the front of this panel. He's wearing a chef's hat, a chef's tunic, but he has a really odd moustache, if it indeed it is a moustache, some kind of facial growth, and his eyebrows are insane. Yeah, this panel will make it onto the socials, I think.
He looks like a demonic version of the ginger-haired Mad Hatter, and this panel actually reminds me of the Mad Hatter's Tea Party.
Elements of that too, I can see that. There's a very Alice in Wonderland feel to it, especially in a sec when I describe Uncle Harry. But the chef, he's grilling sausages by the looks of it over an open flame. There's a few other little beasties running about. There's a spotted thing with a crest on the top of its head being chased by what looks like a small orange-skinned child with a yellow bobble hat and a tail. Between Brute and Glob, there's a sort of stunted blue body with a large, jowly face and what looks like a mop of red curly hair, but with fronds and spikes sticking out of it. And we find out who he is when Brute says, "Pass along another frankfurter, will you, Uncle Harry?" "My goodness, Brute, what an outlandish appetite you have. Doesn't the Sandman feed you properly?" To which Glob laughs.
And then suddenly the sky overhead darkens ominously as a flock of strangely exotic birds looms over the horizon.
Yes, we see the flock of strangely exotic birds. They're green and they look kind of weird, and they're flying in the distance, and Glob points at them and says,
"Brute, look, birds, hundreds of them."
"Tell me about them later, will you, Glob? Right now, I'm looking for the sauerkraut. See Brute with a big hot dog in his hand.
But perhaps Brute would be more concerned if he could view this bird flock up close, for these are not really birds at all, but rather ingeniously camouflaged interdimensional hyperspacecraft bearing an army of invading aliens.
Yeah, how to describe these spaceships then? Well, they're large, they're green, with wings and tails and long sort of necks. Imagine one of the Dinobots, but as a plesiosaur crossed with a Jack Kirby drawing of the Starship Enterprise.
Yes.
And the lead ship, a radio communication can be heard, being broadcast.
Command ship to squadron. Command ship to squadron. Prepare to release energy dome. Over. And moments later...
Yes, we see that the fleet of spaceships has passed over Brute and Glob's lunch party, and dropping from the sky is a large, transparent glass dome. Looking up at all of this, Glob exclaims,
Brute, look! These aren't birds! They're spaceships of some kind!
You're right, Glob. And what's that they're dropping?
Silently, the transparent energy dome falls into place over the populated area of the Dream Stream, imprisoning Brute, Glob, and the other nightmares helplessly inside.
Yes, we see the dome dropping into position. Brute, Glob, Uncle Harry and the others trapped inside. Brute yells, Help! Help! Let us out of here! And one of the spaceships flying overhead broadcasts to the rest of the fleet.
Phase 1 accomplished. Now to land and apprehend the Nightmare Wizard. A short while later, in the craggy mountain sanctuary of the Nightmare Wizard.
Yes, the Nightmare Wizard now, was he in issue 2 or 3?
2, I think, 2. Mm-hmm.
We see the Nightmare Wizard using a stick to support himself, looking at a big cauldron that's bubbling away under a huge fire in front of him, and he's thinking to himself.
The kids in North America will be starting to go to sleep soon. If I want to make sure that there are enough nightmare creatures available for everybody's nightmare, I'd better...
But he breaks off because, well, he appears to have some visitors. He looks up and says,
Hey, who are you, grungy-looking characters? Just because I choose to live in a cave, doesn't mean you have a right to...
But then he exclaims,
Ah!
as we see that the new arrivals are the interdimensional general and one of his soldiers. The general looks impassive as with a fzzzt, one of his men fires upon the Nightmare Wizard. The next panel we see the Nightmare Wizard is stretched out on the ground and the soldiers are tying him up, securing him at the ankles, with his hands behind his back, securing his shoulders as the general waves a hand and says,
Watch him carefully. He may look harmless, but he exercises total control over every creature in this dimension. With him as our prisoner, the Dream Stream is ours. Meanwhile, on Lonely Dolphin Island, in the house the Sandman's pal Jed shares with his fisherman grandfather...
Jed should have had his own comic called The Sandman's Pal Jed.
That would be epic.
Yes, great shot of the house on the island. Again, very Jack Kirby with the way the rocks have been drawn. And we hear Grandad's voice from inside. Why, that's fantastic, Jed!
This one is called Around the World.
We see that Jed is playing with his yo-yo, spinning it around, pulling shapes, flipping it in a big arc circle. That's how you do it around the world, presumably. And Grandad, with his pipe in his hand, replies, It's amazing! Where on earth did you ever learn to do all those yo-yo tricks?
I learned most of them by following the directions in the back of the yo-yo box, and then practicing. But
what, Jed?
But it's real hard, Grandpa, when you have no friends to play with and learn new tricks from.
Interesting lighting on Grandad here. Deep shadows over his face. He looks very menacing. I don't know if that's intentional. I'm having suspicious thoughts now. Grandad replies, I know it is, Jed. And he kneels down to give the boy a hug in the next panel. As they embrace, Jed says,
But you're my friend, aren't you, Grandpa?
Sure I am, Jed. And don't worry, one day you'll have lots of friends. More than you can handle. But now, you better get to bed and get yourself some sleep.
Okay, Gramps. Say, can I take my yo-yo to bed with me?
Of course you can, boy. Pleasant dreams now. Grandad gestures with his pipe as Jed takes his leave.
Soon Jed is fast asleep, his treasured yo-yo clutched tightly in his little hand.
Right, past a couple more pages of adverts, including one that says, Comic books for sale, 1940 to 1975. Over 100,000 in stock. 35 cents for complete list. Robert Bell, P.O. Box 18, Hopage, is that?
I think so.
NY 11787. Listeners, did you write to Robert for a full list of his 100,000 plus comics? Let us know.
Do you still have the catalogue?
Yeah.
Please send us some images of that. That'd be fascinating.
There was also an advertisement for Karate Secrets, X-Ray Specs, and 25 live seahorses for $2.98. Caption reads at the top of page 9.
And before long, he begins having a dream, a peaceful, tranquil dream in which a flock of brightly coloured birds flies gracefully across the horizon of an exotic fantasy landscape.
I want to know what Jed's granddad was smoking, because these are not the dreams that a little boy should be having. You know, I think there must be some mild hallucinogens inside granddad's pipe smoke. But yes, it's very fragrant, very pretty, very lovely, very 70s Jack Kirby, to coin a phrase.
Meanwhile, however, in his dream dome, the Sandman surveys his monitor with a mixture of bewilderment and concern.
Yep, you can see Sandman operating the controls. You can see Jed's face on a number of screens. We also see, on a larger screen, what Jed is dreaming, as Sandman thinks to himself, "That dream little Jed is having seems harmless enough, just a flock of birds, but I can't recall ever seeing birds like that in the dream stream before. And if they're not from the dream stream, then where in blazes?" And we seem to track in closer to the screen, and we see that the birds on the screen are indeed not birds at all, but the flying fleet of the interdimensional aliens. And again, a voice is broadcasting to the others.
"Command ship to squadron! Command ship to squadron!"
Huh? Thinks the Sandman as the spaceships fly closer on the screen. We see them more clearly as the broadcast continues.
"Our first test flight appears successful. We have succeeded in invading this Earthling's dream channels via the dream stream."
And we see indeed that they have invaded Jed's dream. They're flying over the nice, pleasant landscape that he was imagining as the Sandman adjusts the control and thinks, "Why, those aren't birds at all. They're some sort of spacecraft." As the Sandman looks up at the screen, we see the base of one of the spaceships opening up and some missiles hinging out and being pointed, as we hear the General's voice saying,
"When I give the signal, we will annihilate this Earthling with ionic fission bombs. That will prove we can conquer Earth by invading the Earthling's reality world via the dream stream."
The panicked Sandman thinks, "Holy cow, this is no ordinary dream. I've stumbled on some sort of alien plot. We'll have to worry about that later. Right now, I've got to save Jed." And he grabs his trusty car aerial microphone, switches it on and says, "Sandman calling Jed! Sandman calling Jed! Wake up, Jed! Wake up!"
As the Sandman flips the awake switch on his dream console, Jed awakens abruptly and his dream ends with a sudden pop, dispatching the alien space fleet back into the dream stream before it can unleash its load of deadly ionic fission bombs.
Wow, that caption does a lot of heavy lifting, doesn't it?
Indeed.
Jed sits bolt upright in his bed, yo-yo in his left hand, and he yells,
Grandpa, come quick!
Grandad walks in with his blue dressing gown and says, "Jed, boy, what is it?"
I don't know, Grandpa. I don't know. I was dreaming about some birds, and then suddenly I woke up.
Grandad sits down, gives Jed a hug as Jed continues,
"There's something wrong, Grandpa. I'm scared."
Now, Jed, don't be frightened. You were just having a nightmare, that's all. Try to go back to sleep." We're continued on the 5th page following.
Wow.
Toys, advert for Amazing World of DC Comics, that full page. How sad with Captain Marvel and Stalker and everyone else that we've seen 1,000 times by now.
Yay.
The Black Dragon Fighting Society,
Count
Count
Dante.
Dante, Jinx, and a caption at the top of page 11.
Meanwhile, back in the Dream Dome...
Yep, Sandman standing. There we have it. There's the panel that the cover image on the banner has been taken from. There we go. Page 11, panel 1. I might have to share that on a Facebook group.
Yes.
Might have to do that with a matter of extreme urgency. Look at me, I'll say. Look what I've noticed. I've recently joined a Facebook group called Comic Book Swipes. I think that's what it's called, and that's very interesting. Deals very, very well with this sort of thing. I've shown off a couple of times on it. Anyway, Sandman is standing amongst all of his equipment in the Dream Dome, and he's thinking, Jed will be all right for now. But now I'm mighty interested in that flock of so-called birds. He walks over to the ejector tube, starts to launch himself in, thinking, I've got a hunch something's rotten in the dream stream, and I intend to find out what it is. That he lets himself go.
With the speed of thought, the Sandman is catapulted into the dream stream.
There he goes.
And before long, he has traversed the fantasy forest and made his way to the cavernous home of the Nightmare Wizard.
Sandman is walking up to the cave, thinking, I only hope he's... Hey, what's that muffled noise I hear in there? And he walks in to see... Just what I feared. The Nightmare Wizard, of course, tied up by the ropes as Sandman continues. Whoever masterminded this alien plot has taken you prisoner. Reaches forward, removes the gag from the Nightmare Wizard, saying, I've reprimanded you in the past for scaring the daylights out of kids with your frightening nightmare monsters, but I knew you'd never stoop so low as to murder a child with a fission bomb.
Sandman, thank heaven you've come. Aliens from another dimension have taken over the dream stream so they can conquer the Earth by invading people's nightmares.
Sandman looks on very impassively as he receives this info dump. Don't worry, we'll handle this, but first, tell me, where are Brute and Glob? Unseen by the Sandman at this point, standing behind him, is one of the alien soldiers, raising a club to bring it down on his head. Nightmare Wizard, however, does see him and yells,
Sandman, look out!
too late, there's a massive wham! Sandman is struck in the back of the head.
A short while later, after the Master of Dreams has regained consciousness...
Yes, we see that the Sandman and the Nightmare Wizard have both now been bound, both lying on the ground, with the General and his soldiers standing looking down at them as the General says,
So, you're the famous Sandman, are you? Our scholars encountered mention of your name while studying Earth, but we assumed you were only a fairy tale.
all fairy tales have a basis in reality, you fiend. And your vicious scheme for invading Earth through people's dreams and annihilating people with fission bombs will ultimately fail. I know it will.
Ah, but you're wrong, Sandman. That scheme will succeed. Our attempt to kill the boy this evening failed because of you. But now that you are a prisoner, our next attempt will succeed. I promise you.
The General's army starts to walk away at this point, as the General continues.
Now, I'm afraid I must be off. But if you find yourself getting bored, Sandman, you might try counting sheep. I understand it's really quite restful.
Very funny, says the Sandman as General takes his leave.
Moments later...
Sandman, Nightmare Wizard still bound, on their own now, as the Wizard says.
Well, this is a fine kettle of fish, Sandman. What'll we do?
Sandman looks round over his shoulder, replies, If we turn back to back, do you think you can pull off my glove?
I think so. Why?
My hypnosonic whistle's in there. It's our only chance.
What good'll that do you? You can't call Brute and Glob. They're trapped inside the alien's energy dome.
We see that he has been successful pulling off Sandman's glove, because we see the glove lying to one side, and the Wizard has the Sandman's whistle in his hand. Sandman has managed to manoeuvre himself down so that he can get his mouth closer to the whistle. As he's doing this, he's saying, I'm going to contact my pal Jed. He's our only chance. Now, hold the whistle steady so I can blow on it.
The hypnosonic whistle's ultrasonic vibrations enable the Sandman to communicate with Jed via the fantasy dimension.
Yes, Jed's asleep in his kip. Nice pink-purple cloud hovering above him, and the Sandman's face appears in this cloud, and he says, Jed, listen to me. This is the Sandman speaking. You must wake up, put on your clothes, and ride my whistle's ultrasonic sound waves into the dream stream. I'll guide you mentally along the way. Now, Jed, wake up. Jed sits up in his bed, rubbing his eyes, thinking,
Huh? The Sandman, he needs me. I gotta get dressed.
putting on his clothes. He thinks,
I'd better take my yo-yo. Wherever I'm going, they might not have any toys there.
yeah, Jed, that's what to think about. It's an emergency. Good grief.
Within seconds, Jed is standing astride the waves of sonic vibrations and hurtling through the trackless void like a streaking comet.
My goodness. How? That's what I want to know. We'll come back to that in the discussion when I'll proclaim my confusion and Peter will come up with something very unlikely.
Until finally he arrives in the bizarre fantasy universe known as the Dream Stream.
A couple of panels of Jed's silhouette basically wiggling and ziggling around on weird streaking purple...
Kirby cosmicness.
Yes, that look kind of like sperm if you ask me, but anyway. Jed alights in the final panel of page 14, looking around, seeing weird creatures floating around and weird landscapes and weird growths and plants, and he thinks,
Gosh, what a weird place. It's all full of weird plants and weird animals. Just like a comic book, only lots more fantastic.
Carefully following the mental instructions given him by the Sandman, Jed cautiously makes his way through the beautiful but dangerous fantasy forest.
yes, Jed, to himself as he makes his way along. Really weird creatures, and there's one at the front that looks like it's maybe actually eating another one. I'm not entirely sure.
Gasp.
Very creepy. We'll see if there's room for it in the socials.
Under ordinary circumstances, no mere mortal could pass through this fearsome alien dimensional jungle and live. But on this occasion, the man-eating fantasy plants, under explicit telepathic orders from the Nightmare Wizard, fold their blood-sucking tentacles and let Jed pass.
Yes, I really hope there's room for that one in the socials. Absolutely grotesque. The captioning continues.
And finally, Jed stands before the forbidding mountainside retreat, which is the home of the Nightmare Wizard.
Yep, standing outside the cavern, Jed yells,
Hello? Is anybody home?
Jed, thank goodness, hurry, we're in here.
Sandman, what's going on here? What's happened?
Never mind that now, Jed. You've got to untie us. Hurry, Jed, there isn't much time. Jed goes behind him, starts to untie the ropes. But suddenly, a voice from off-camera exclaims,
He means, you puny little earthling, that I, General Quark, might return at any moment to doom your foolish attempt at escape.
Jed turns and looks with a...
Huh?
We see the General has reappeared, holding a large gun, which he's pointing at the Wizard and the Sandman. And Jed, we should point out the Wizard and Sandman are still secure, it seems. The General indicates with his gun and says,
Now step away from those two captives and drop that weapon I see attached to your belt.
Weapon? That's not a weapon, sir. That's a yo-yo. It's a toy as kids use to do tricks.
Yeah, Jed, holding his yo-yo now, suddenly he starts to spin it, yelling,
This one's called the London Bridge.
flips the yo-yo under his left leg and out around his left leg, and then he spins it around his body, saying,
And this one's called Around the World.
the General isn't impressed.
All right, I've seen enough nonsense. Put that thing away.
But, sir, you haven't seen my best trick. It's called Bonk the Creep, see?
And with that, Jed spins the yo-yo and it bonks the General in the eye by the looks of things, sending stars spinning. The Sandman observes, Good work, Jed. See, the General is out for the count, his helmet's fallen off. Jed is untying the Sandman and the Wizard. Sandman is saying, That was quick thinking, Jed.
It sure was, kid. Remind me to see to it that you have nothing but pleasant dreams for an entire week. Moments later...
With the General now secured to a stalagmite with ropes, this is hilarious. Hobie wakes up and is really annoyed. Sandman, Nightmare Wizard and Jed are running off with the Sandman saying, Come on, you two. We've got work to do and not much time in which to do it in.
Moments later, a shrill blast from the Sandman's hypnosonic whistle shatters the alien energy dome into fragments, as though it were a brittle eggshell.
Yeah, great shot of the Sandman blowing into his whistle, and what looks like a little scraggle of orange energy comes from it, strikes the dome, but shatters with a crack. Jed exclaims,
Oh, wow! Sandman, that was great!
and then rather creepily, the Nightmare Wizard says,
A mere parlour trick, my boy. Come back sometime soon and I'll show you some real magic. And then...
Yes, Brute and Glob and Uncle Harry and the chef and all the others from the party have all been released. They start running towards the Sandman and the others, with Glob saying,
Oh boy, Sandman, are we glad to see you?
I am going to have nightmares about Uncle Harry. I'm not lying. Look at him. Look at it. It's awful. Brute, delightedly, shakes the Sandman's hand, saying, It sure took you an awful long time to get here, sport. What happened? Your tricycle lose a wheel bearing or something? As he shakes hands with Brute, Sandman turns to Jed and the Wizard, saying, These are my nightmare friends, Jed. Their names are Brute and Glob. So, first time Jed has met Brute and Glob, is that right?
Well, being conscious of it.
Interesting. Okay. I wish this had run to 59 issues like Commandy had. Jack doing 30 of them and then everyone else getting a
Wonderful.
shot for another, and then
Yeah.
Omak turning up in the backup strip or something like guest starring this. A crossover with Karate Kid.
Yeah.
Oh,
Crossover with the Golden Age Sandman.
exactly. Listeners, what would you rather have had? We've reached the final page.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Brute, sir.
Yep, as Jed shakes hands with Brute, and Brute says, Likewise, kid. Wait till I get my hands on a pen and I'll give you my personal autograph. Glob is delighted and laughs. Heads up, you nightmares, says Sandman, as he looks askance. Here come the aliens. Hundreds of them. To which Brute replies, Oh boy, it's clobbering time. Is that the first time someone has said it's clobbering time on this podcast?
I believe it is, yes.
Will it be the last?
Stay tuned. A resounding battle ensues as the Sandman and his friends, aided by the Dreamstream's nightmare inhabitants, fight fearlessly against the alien invaders.
Great shot of Sandman palming one of the aliens and one guy with a gun at the front and Glob bouncing along in the background and guns flying everywhere, and Brute is lifting one guy up. It looks as if he's about to smash another invading alien, and he's doing so, he's saying, I always thought I was ugly, but you creeps take the cake.
Disorganized and confused, without General Quark to lead them, the aliens are soon defeated and sent scurrying homeward.
Yes. Loosely and vaguely in the distance, we see all the plesiosaurus-shaped spaceships flying off as our heroes watch them go. Jed says,
Gosh, Sandman, do you think they'll ever come back again?
Brute replies, Look at it this way, kid. If they do come back, it'll give you a chance to see me in action all over again. Sandman pats Jed in the arm, saying, It would have been a whole different story without you, Jed. But now it's time for you to be getting home.
Okay, Sandman.
A short blast from the Sandman's whistle sends Jed whirling homeward, flashing through the sky in a burst of brilliant starlight, and, moments later...
We see Jed back at home, sound asleep in his own bed, Grandad looking in, thoughtfully, checking that he's all right, and thinking to himself, Cute little tag. I wonder what he's dreaming. Caption reads,
The end.
And another caption tells us...
Next issue on sale during the last week in July.
Awesome. Right, so the cover doesn't quite reflect what's going on.
No, true. Well, no beasties were attacking. Well, they were attacking Jed, but not at that time.
And they didn't creep in through his bedroom window and
they're
stuff.
coming in through his dreams, but yeah.
But I suppose Sandman having to try and get Jade to wake up to kind of help him is fairly accurate.
Yeah,
so
very true.
It's not quite a Defender's... It's a bit of a Defender's deadline. I think we should talk about the yo-yo, because that, to me, seems to be the whole thing that this hinges on. In some ways, this is the most simplistic one we've done.
Yeah, I can see that,
And the yo-yo really does suggest that Jack is aiming this at kids who might be reading.
Yeah, definitely. We've said this all along. This is the perfect comic for kids, without a doubt. I don't know if it's Jack or Joe or Michael Fleischer who's came up with the initial concept of using the yo-yo.
That's true, actually.
So
giving all the credit to Kirby and Fleischer. You're right.
So I don't know where that came from, but obviously I think it's a case of someone's got a yo-yo and they've just looked at all the things that they're... I mean, there was a bit of a yo-yo craze in the 70s.
I mean, I was only, 2 when this came out, but I remember having yo-yos often when I was a kid.
I mean, there's that Hembeck strip with Captain Boomerang meeting up with, what was it, General Yo-Yo and someone else.
Yes.
But yeah, so that was funny. But it was kind of like in the youth zeitgeist, to sound fancy.
Yeah, I mean, I seem to remember a Peanuts strip or 2 that uses them as well. I was reminded a lot of Flash 176 at a couple of points here with the reaffirmation of the dream stream and as a separate sort of dimension.
Yeah.
That the aliens use, they invade via this particular dimension. That was quite interesting.
It's like taking over Malta in World War II.
Fair.
It's a good launch point to attack anywhere in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was recently in Malta. I got a bit of a history lesson. They've been taken over so many times.
History Minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, fantastic stuff.
And it's interdimensional aliens, which I quite like as well. Because I think this is the first issue where the Sandman doesn't have an encounter with local law enforcement agencies, which end up with him having to either escape or be locked up. So that was quite interesting. It was good to see Jeddy's granddad again, but this one was kind of a bit more out there than a couple. No immediate threat to contemporary Earth, apart from what was happening to Jed. But it was all dealt with without contemporary Earth being seen too much.
Yeah, I think this is the first one as well that Sandman hasn't thrown sand in someone's face to knock them out. Yeah, which is interesting. And Brute and Glob being sidelined was an interesting way to deal with them, to be honest.
I thought that was hilarious. Like, the tea party and stuff. That is just like they've got a social life.
Yeah, seeing the other inhabitants, they've got a family. That's
it.
Great.
I mean, we've alluded in the past that we know that these characters were used in the Neil Gaiman Sandman in the future. And this is one of these issues when you read some of this, bearing that in mind, you sort of go, oh, right, okay. So the fact that Brute and Glob can just nip off on their holidays and leave Sandman there is kind of interesting if you bear that, future stuff in mind, and just we can't really take it into too much of account of what we're dealing with just now because, it hasn't happened yet.
But remember, what has happened yet is every time we see Brute and Glob in Sandman's control room,
of course,
they're always in like these tubes as if they've been held prisoner.
Yes.
But here it's like, off you go on your holidays, they've got luggage.
Yes, that was hilarious.
What are they taking?
No, that's a really, really interesting point. He didn't
change
have
of
them
socks.
Contained. So, which means sometimes he does have to keep them restrained. So
because they're always saying, let me out, let me out.
Interesting. They all seem to be pretty chill with each other at this point. Yeah, you're right, actually. Having them all sort of held up, contained, suggests that there's some sort of need to do so, whereas at this point things are relaxed enough that they're able to go and visit their family, including their creepy Uncle Harry. Maybe
the Dream Stream's a place that they can go to without causing any mischief, because obviously it's all unreal anyway.
Interesting. Yeah.
But it's fascinating. It's, as I said, during the recording, it is the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. It's all these weird looking people doing weird things. It's fantastic.
It's very Lewis Carroll, isn't it? It's very creepy. It's very creepy. Like, I hope there's room in the socials to... only 18 pages. There should hopefully be enough room in the socials to give you a good sort of representative example of what's going on in this issue. I like the design of the spaceships that the baddies were using. I like the design of the baddies.
Baddies kind of reminded me a bit of a cross between Etrigan and Merman, the Masters of the Universe.
I did think of I did think of him, of Merman, when I was doing the prep for this one. That's a really good point. I want us to go to page 8, panel 2, just for a second.
Oh, and the sinister grandpa face.
Yeah, but it's real hard, Grandpa, when you have no friends to play with and learn new tricks from.
I know it is, Jed.
He looks very foreboding. I mean, Jed could be at school, socialising and meeting kids of his own age and stuff. Why are they living on Dolphin Island in the middle of nowhere? We haven't been told that, have we? This is what I'm starting to wonder now. Has Jed been kidnapped? Is he his real grandpa?
Is that why Sandman's taken a particular interest in Jed?
It's been speculated, hasn't it, elsewhere, that Jed is a version of Commandy.
Yeah, I'm sure I've heard that.
Yeah. And Commandy of issue 1, of course, features the death of Commandy's granddad right at the start. The bunker of Commandy has been invaded. So that's an interesting parallel I'm just pointing out.
Yeah.
I'm just mentioning, because I finally started my Commandy read-through, listeners. I think that's an interesting thing just to consider. But yeah, we'll bear that in mind, because we've still got a couple more Sandman stories to do, and we're going to come back to Commandy at some point, so we'll see if we've
Absolutely.
anything there. I liked how, in some ways, small scale's not the word for it, but it was almost subversive the way they dealt with the baddies.
Yeah.
In as much as Jed knocked the general out with his yo-yo, and then they had a big fisticuff fight.
Pretty much, yeah.
Rather than these marauding spaceships, which I now realise look a bit like the ones out of the George Powell War of the Worlds movie.
Yeah.
Rather than them firing missiles at everyone. I mean, I was wondering as we were reading it, are we going to get a scene when they make their way into contemporary Earth and start firing missiles, and Sandman has to run down and has a conversation with
the policeman?
Yeah. Is it, like the brain that blacked out the Bronx, like that issue. So I'm glad that didn't happen. So it was quite interesting that they just kind of did it amongst themselves.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, all the action was in the dream stream.
Yeah.
As it were. Yeah. No, it's great fun. I love the fact that the Nightmare Wizards came back. It's good to bring them back. Pure dead brilliant, so it was.
Yes, and I like the fact that he's, just even thinking about it a little bit more, the fact that he's in charge of Nightmares. That's the department he's in charge of.
Yeah, he's not a villain. It's just what he does.
Yes.
Someone's got to do this job. And of course, if it's a dirty job, you get a Scotsman in to do it.
You get a dirty old Scotsman with the looks of him. I bet it's really smelly in his cavern. He does look like he needs a good wash. I'm so glad that Jed decided to take his yo-yo with him.
Yes, we were having a laugh at him for that, but however.
It's flagged up there in the splash panel.
Chekhov's yo-yo.
Chekhov's yo-yo, who sported the Montrose Avenue at the Portsmouth Wedgwood Rooms in their final tour in 1998. Yeah, it's a slightly abrupt ending as well, like some of the other ones have been.
Yeah.
It feels less abrupt than issue 1 and less abrupt than blowing up Dr. Spider's submarine.
Yeah.
I mean, this entire fleet is dealt with in essentially 2 panels.
Oh, yeah.
1 panel when they fight and 1 panel when they run away.
Yeah, I mean, the fight scene looks kind of like it's from the Batman TV series. You can imagine Biff Bam Pow coming up there.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that the general doesn't have like a second in command who's able to rally the troops and organise them to fight back.
No, although he is referred to as Major very early on as well. I don't know if that's just like an editorial mistake, but it is the same character.
Interesting.
Unless he's a Major General.
Could be. Maybe he gets promoted. There's definitely as well sort of an increasing relationship between Sandman and Jed, but also looking at the last couple of panels, Brute gets quite a few comedy lines.
Yeah.
So obviously the relationship dynamic between him and Sandman has changed at this point. We'll have to have a look next month and see what that, or the next issue, which will be along very soon, and see what happens there. But yes, it's clobbering time. That's quite funny.
I know. Jack Kirby drawing a character saying it's clobbering time. I wonder if that was in the script when he actually drew it, or whether they added that in
I can imagine
afterwards.
actually. It's quite funny that. The one thing I think is worth considering is obviously Fleischer had recently written the Spectre stories for Adventure Comics that we covered last year.
Yeah.
And the difference between these Sandman stories and the Spectre stories is very interesting. There's a real hint of horror in the Sandman ones, but they don't go anywhere near as far as the Spectre stories did in outright sort of like scariness. But you get the sense, at least I get the sense reading this, that it wouldn't take too much just to tip into that slightly scarier, more violent or unpleasant sort of situation. It's almost like, especially on page 15 with the man-eating fantasy plants.
I know.
It's just like, hints of it. Hints of nastiness.
And the page before that, page 14, we've got to talk about the cosmicness.
Yes.
It's almost like the Silver Surfer. Like going through all the Kirby dots.
Yes.
All the Kirby crackle in the background as he's leaving reality.
Very much so.
Riding the waves of sonic vibrations and hurtling through the trackless void like a streaking
You must wake up, put on your clothes, ride my whistle's ultrasonic sound waves. So Sandman must have been continuing to send some kind of signal so that Jed could make it. We don't really see how Jed makes his way onto it.
No.
There must be some real special connection between them that enables that to happen, I think. Interesting.
Maybe Jed's Sandman's son.
Maybe Jed is the Sandman. I don't know. So listeners, if you want to grab your copy of issue 6, we're going to read the final letter from that letters page.
And it says, Dear Joe, after reading the first 4 issues of Sandman, I noticed that the comic is apparently not concerned with poignant social issues. It does not dwell in bleak reality, thoughtfully probing into the deep problems associated with living in the crude real world. In short, it is not realistic. It is, however, fun to read. Sandman is fun, I think, because it contains such sheer quantity of invention. Wild, unrestrained imagination seems to run rampant through its pages. This imagination has been evident in the scripts since Fleischer began doing them. Fleischer keeps giving us straightforward Sandman stops the bad guys from conquering the world theme in every issue, but does it without becoming boringly repetitive. In fact, my only complaint so far is the repetitive use of the kid Jed. After 3 appearances, I'm getting very tired of him. Why don't you let Sandman invade someone else's nightmares for a change? Fleischer's villains, though equally far out, have all been at least physically very different. So have the techniques by which the Sandman has overcome these villains. There has also been a good bit of variation in the roles Brute and Glob have played in these different stories. The constant stream of new ideas, then, make each issue an enjoyable one. Besides this, Sandman is also fun to read because it has humour, not hackneyed and pathetic wisecracks, but actual humour. It really is funny to see Sandman grimly pursuing his responsibilities, while assorted policemen, nightmare wizards, globs and brutes poke fun at him. As Brute so drolly pointed out to the Sandman on one occasion,
"For a guy that's supposed to be eternal and immortal, you look positively ridiculous."
That brings this missive to a final point. The Sandman, you should realise, is not really this comic's most interesting character. Someone else has been stealing the spotlight, and I suspect making a strong impression on most readers with his occasional, but well-timed, amusing observations. I'm referring, of course, to that fine gentleman, that charming person, that wonderful endearing fellow, Brute. And that's from Paul M. Rath, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Hello, Wisconsin! That's interesting. The whole point is that it's not realistic.
Yeah, it's great. It's a dream, it's a fantasy.
I think if this comic was dealing with poignant social issues, it would be... Well, it's not the point of it, is it?
No, I mean, Brute and Glob are not the hard-travelling heroes.
Can you imagine a Green Lantern, Green Arrow 76
I think we might have said this before.
cover homage with them? That would be amazing.
Yeah.
To flip that slightly, though, a slightly more realistic take on this would have been excellent, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, we've quite often said, imagine if this story had been drawn by Kurt Swan or Neil Adams, you know, how much different it would be.
Yeah.
If this series had, I think, continued, it probably inevitably would have wandered more into the real world.
Yeah.
Really interesting points to sort of consider.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole point of it is the unreality because you're dealing with dreams.
Yeah, that's what's epic about it. It's unbridled. You're not limited by anything. Just as they say, you're not limited in a comic to show anything, but apart from what the artist can draw. But dreams, again, can go anywhere.
Yep, and we should maybe talk a little bit about that, actually, now that this letter has reminded us of the line, "For a guy that's supposed to be eternal and immortal."
Mm-hmm.
That says something about the nature of the Sandman that hasn't actually been addressed in the stories yet.
Yeah, the fact he's working 24/7, it seems to be eternal and immortal.
Is he actually human?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Was he human?
Who can say?
Who
can say? Who can say which other writers will come along and retcon and play around with and tie it into Wonder Woman or something? Anyway, yes, we shall see. Will General Electric come back? Maybe.
If only.
So yes, the Sandman will return before too long.
Yes, did you enjoy that, folks? Do you want a more realistic take on the Sandman? Of course you don't. Why don't you write in and confirm our thoughts on it at theearth2podcast@gmail.com. Also, follow us on social media because David's going to put up some lovely bonus material.
Am I? All I've really got this week is just cover and... I might have some original art. I'll need to have a look. Yes, we'll see, listeners.
Okay,
at the very least, to be covering some nice panels to look at.
Excellent. On Facebook and Instagram, we're at the Earth2 Podcast, and at Twitter, because we're still calling it that, we're at podcast_Earth2, and it's the number 2 for all of our socials.
Yes, we haven't sorted out a blue sky, but we'll probably get around to that at some point.
Yes.
Maybe, who can say? As I always say at this point, if you're feeling generous, you could go to wherever it is you receive your podcast and leave us a positive review or spread the word. Tell your pals. You can go to our coffee page, you'll find it in our link tree, and you could buy Peter the price of a beverage. Pay for all the coffee he'll consume with all the editing he has to start doing now because we haven't recorded anything very much recently.
Very
so
true.
That's fun. What we do next week, I can't remember it. It's going to be a surprise, I think.
Yep, on that note, I've been Peter.
And I've been David. Sleep well. We'll see you next time on
the Earth2 Podcast.
Transmatter Cube activated. Return coordinates set for Earth Prime.
Well, this is a fine kettle of fish, Sandman. What'll we do?
If we turn back to back, do you think you can pull off my glove? Right, okay.
Do you want me to say the line again?
No.